Opening title appears. Universal Design in Higher Education. Title swipes across the screen, followed by Roger O. Smith, followed by Tim O'Connor, followed by UW La Crosse. Title fades to black. Universal Design and Testing Part 4, Tim O'Connor. Video fades to black. Tim O'Connor standing behind a podium in front of an audience.
Does anyone have any questions? I ran through a lot of stuff real quickly. I just want to give you the opportunity to ask any questions about testing.
I think one of the interesting points you bring up are these students that are used to keyboarding also these screen readers. Now we have screen readers in a lot of our labs, or in our computer labs, but Chris, why don't you talk a minute about what we got that license that Larry Ravenberg bought for us for students to be able to use different computers on campus?
Yeah, what we did is we just updated Kurzweil 3000 so that it's on a network server. And so it's going to be, the advantages that we have now is that with being on a network server, the Kurzweil 3000 basically is a software that will read text to a student. It might be their textbook, or they can use it in other applications, so maybe our desire to learn. So what the nice thing about this is now it's on a server, so that it's going to be able to, for any student in any of the computer labs, they can go to any computer and sit down without having to go to a specific place, a specific computer. It can also, it'll also open up additional things like this software is going to be available in all the residents' housing, so in their computer labs. So students don't have to come to campus, they can just go downstairs. Also, it has some other additional things where there's a license to go feature, or let's say if a student was going to study abroad or had a distance education need or something like that, we can unplug a license so that they can put it on that computer and it will automatically time out. Also, we'll be able to use that program in our office for, like what Tim was talking about, was the testing needs of the students and being able to turn on and turn off specific tools that would not compromise the exam.
And that would also give you the opportunity maybe to use that in your own area, because a student was in my office yesterday and he said, you know, June, I just like to take it with the professor in case there's a question. And, you know, he misses that part of the answer they would give, but he needs the extended time. So, I mean, students recognize if the professor were there, and you just went through that when you talked about some tests are very confusing for students. So hopefully that'll help, because the student can get it to go in an area where you will be around, and they'll have access to that text reader.
Are the screen readers adaptable to languages other than English?
Yes, yes. Actually, like Kurzweil 3000, for French books, Spanish, we'll be able to scan that in foreign languages and have it read back in a foreign language too.
Kurzweil is a wonderful way to give a test to a student who needs audio presentation. It's much better than you taping or having someone read it to them, because all you need is a text file. You can give a Word document, where it's just wonderful for the test, and then that will take care of it. And one thing that our office has been doing this kind of thing for several years, and at an early point in this, like it was like this beginning of the second year, my testing coordinator came to me and asked me how to read an equation. And I started saying, and then I asked, why? He said, well, I'm taping this test, and I didn't know how to read this equation. So that was the first I knew we were even taping tests, because I thought I had made it clear that isn't our job. That needs to be done by someone who's an expert in the discipline. I mean, that's a perfect example of it. I mean, who knows what's being said when you do equations? Foreign language, another perfect example. You can't have people who are testers, testing people. We shouldn't be reading unless it's, expert on testing. If it was a test on testing, maybe we could. But it should be done. If it's going to be read or taped or something like that, it should be done by someone who is an expert in that area. And that no one's a more expert than the person who told these students about these concepts and its vocabulary and things. Now, Kurzweil has problems with math. We're not there yet. But it's only a matter of time. It will occur. You know, math is always going to be a funky little thing that's difficult to deal with. But it is important that you understand that some students can't truly display their knowledge unless maybe you help them. You know, I think we have to look at things in universal design as far as testing goes is, do you want your students, do you just want to assess what you taught them, or do you want them to learn more? Do you want them to truly understand and get a good view of what it is you've taught them, or do you just want to kind of maybe get a snapshot and kind of a hope and a prayer kind of a test? You know, I think as educators, most people would say, I want my students, number one, to learn as much as possible. And number two, I want to be able to assess accurately what they know. And in order to do that, you might need to relook at how you do testing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? Just saying this is the way I've always done it isn't really good rationale for continuing to do something. If that were true, things would be a little different today because nobody would have ever tried to improve anything. You know, and we can improve testing. And it's a very, very important part of instruction. So I hope you will take some of these things in mind. Take that test audit. Take it back. Look at one of your tests. Look at it'd be very helpful to you to look at the physical environment where you give your test and take that audit there and just kind of assess what is it here and what can you do. I know that there are a number of things you just have no control over in the physical environment. But there are some things you can do to maybe help. We're going to continue to work on the physical environment to change that so that we do make things more accessible. One thing we're working on at Madison that we're going to use with the project in the system overall is a building accessibility checklist where when buildings are renovated or they are built new, there's this checklist that is universal design. Remember, ADA standards are minimal. The ADA standards aren't necessarily accessible for everyone. As a matter of fact, they're not. That's a very minimal standard. We want things more as accessible as possible. This checklist can be used by anyone who's not an expert. It can just be put into the process whereby then we can, you know, it's a yes, no. And if it's a no, you need to either change it or rationalize why it's a no so that things are accessible. It doesn't cost any more if we start this in the building process or when you're renovating something. It doesn't cost any more to do it at that time and make it more accessible. Oftentimes it can be cheaper. So it's not really a matter of expense. If you have to go after the fact, after the building's built, and then you go in and say, oh, we didn't do this and that, and then it gets expensive, yes. So we want to try to change the culture here, and that's another way we're going to try to do that. Yes?
Could I suggest with that checklist that you eventually get UW system capital planning and budget and the Division of State Facilities buy-in on that? Because if you don't, it won't happen on the campus.
Right. We have been talking, in the President's Advisory Committee, we've already been talking about that concept already. And we talked with President Riley just a few weeks ago about that.
So it'll be very helpful, but unless they buy in,
exactly.
We're not going to get funded for it or whatever the issue is.
And that's what we're working towards. Now, again, I just want to mention, my original teaching area was social studies. And, you know, one of the things I told students when we're looking at history is evolutionary changes are much better than revolutionary changes. That's an important point to remember. Evolution's slow, but it's long-lasting change. Revolutionary changes, people don't often accept very well, and they often tend to be very short-lived. We're going to do what we can, but it's going to be a slower process.
Video fades to black. Closing. R2D2 logo appears. Title reads, copy and distribute freely, but use in its entirety and do not alter. Access said project, copyright 2009, Rehabilitation Research Design and Disability R2D2 Center. Please visit us at access-ed.r2d2.uwm.edu. The Access Ed project is supported in part by the U.S. Department of Education Office of Post-Secondary Education, PR Award P33A050090. The Access Ed documents contained in this video are those of the grantee and do not necessarily reflect directly on the U.S. Department of Education.